love mentor and social worker gone rogue. Really, I've just been trying to figure out truth, what truth is for me, what truth is for this journey we're all on. I walk with others on their way home and they walk with me. My favorite quote is by Ram Dass, and it's, we're all just walking each other home. So that's really what I live my
Love
life
it.
by. And I think my journey really represents that.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if I've ever heard that quote, but it's quite a like a comforting way of looking at all that, that oneness and the connectedness that we probably all have that we're just not ready to embrace altogether, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so true. I mean, I think and I know throughout my story, there's often a lot of times where I just felt like I was the only man on the ship, right? The only one, no one else was there to help me. But in reality, that quote always brings me back to remember I'm not alone in this, and
Yeah.
really takes out the differentiating levels, right? Like we're all in this
Yeah.
together. No one is above anyone, no one is below anyone. We're all just walking each other home. And I literally picture that, right? Like we're all
Yeah.
just hand in hand on our way home.
Yeah. And I mean, it brings a whole new level of meaning to that you're not alone. I feel like that kind of gets watered down, I guess, if you will, at this point. It's like, okay, well, no
Mm-hmm.
kidding. I know I'm not.
Yeah.
Um, can we go past that? Is there something more
Deeper.
to that? So where does your story begin then?
Ultimately begins lifetimes and lifetimes ago. But the story we're going to talk about today, I guess, like this lifetime I'm living in started in 1983. And I say that because so often I share my story and I start somewhere else. And I feel like today it's meant to start
Yeah.
right at the beginning. Um, I was always a child that was very outgoing and filled with this zest for life and curiosity. I asked so many questions that those around me really struggled with my light, and not maliciously or intentionally, but it was so
Yeah.
bright, and it was a direct reflection seeing now of maybe some things they really hadn't worked through themselves. So as I grew up, I
Yeah.
really started to lock that light up. And my father was probably the closest to me in the way in which we viewed life. He was very childlike and just had this love and zest for life, and very much lived in the moment, very present, very just a drop of a hat. Let's go to the zoo. Let's go ride a motorbike. Let's do whatever. Like there wasn't a lot of planning really with my father. And as a
Yeah.
child, that was ideal, right? He was the most amazing
Sure.
being in
Absolutely.
my
Right.
life. Yeah. And but as I grew up, I got to start to hear the other adult stories that people had about him. And it was really this story of he's immature, he's mentally ill, all the things that didn't make sense to me as a
Yeah.
kiddo. But it caused me to look back at myself and be like, oh no, I'm a lot like him. And really continued to become what society expected me to be and the people around me because of what I
Yeah.
had heard about my father and realizing our similarities. So I continued to lock myself up, and at the age of 17 was in a really dark place and ultimately
Hmm.
attempted to take my own life. I was unsuccessful, um, but very close to being successful. And I know they say almost only counts in horseshoes and hand
Horseshoes
grenades.
and
That's a statement
hand
that
grenades.
we
Yeah.
have.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
this was close. They read me my last rites, and I thought my journey here
Cool.
was going to end. It did not. And it was actually 22 years ago this March, but the doctor
Wow.
said they could not explain it by medicine, but I was a miracle and I was going to live.
Wow.
6 months after that, though, my father was successful in taking his life. So when I lived through that experience, my own attempt, I felt like there was a reason I was still here, and it couldn't be because of me, because I was unworthy to be here. Here I was, I attempted to take my life. I couldn't even do that right. So I must be here to sacrifice for someone else. So it kind of became my mission that I needed to sacrifice whatever my time here was to ensure someone else's time was better. And then when my father was successful in his suicide attempt, that is when I knew for sure I needed to keep the Ashley that was filled with life and happy and just so exuberant
Yeah.
locked up, right? Because he confirmed that, yeah, this is our reality. Um, I,
Yeah.
at that moment, met my now ex-husband and his son, who they were going through gaining custody due to some issues with his biological mother. And I fell in love. I fell in love with Jaden, who is my son, my adopted son now. He was 5 months old. He had been through so much in his tiny little life that most
Yeah.
adults have never been through. And I dedicated my life to him. I dedicated my life to ensuring that he never had to suffer anymore. And that was where my journey went. I really started to build this external look like,
Yeah.
which was the family and the career and the home and all the things, right?
All the things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all the things. I had all the things. And I thought I was the happiest I'd ever been in my life, the healthiest, the most mentally stable, all of those things. And then at 32 years old, I was getting a divorce and all those things were being ripped out from under me. They were
Right.
gone.
Right. Yeah.
And I couldn't find happiness within, and I self-destructed. I went through a very dark time, was doing things I never thought I was capable of. And eventually kind of was faced with kind of a, do we keep going this way or do we figure it out? And I got in trouble
Yeah.
at work and I had to do what was called reflective supervision. And this beautiful woman saw me and my light that I hadn't seen since I was a child. But she was able to see
It's
it
a
and
long
she
time.
held
Yeah.
the light for me to find my way there. Um, and ever since, I haven't looked back. It's really been a journey of
Hmm.
healing my inner child so I can get to the point of learning to forgive, and continuously practice forgiveness and live in this state of just pure love and gratitude, and understanding of where I'm going. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's really my journey. I have, also, I guess a piece I didn't share, I kind of skipped over because I often forget about it. But when I attempted to take my own life, I was actually diagnosed with bipolar. So I was 17 years old carrying a very heavy diagnosis. I think actually they were
Heavyweight. Yeah.
just starting to allow that diagnosis at such a young age. I think it's still pretty controversial.
Yeah.
Placed on some very heavy medications. And by the time I was 20 years old, I was told by my therapist that I would never obtain a college degree. I would never have a career because my mental illness was too severe and persistent, that I would not, like my future was written in the stone or
Unstable.
whatever you
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Social Security disability deemed me disabled, which is a very difficult thing to occur.
Yeah.
And it did.
Oh.
Here I was 20 years old and already my whole future has been mapped out for me by those around me. And at that time, I kind of made it my mission that I was going to learn everything about this diagnosis I was carrying,
Yeah.
but I began to identify with it. I really became bipolar itself. And then I had a switch. When I found Ram Dass and really dove into his readings and lectures and felt that there was a different way. And after about a decade of carrying that diagnosis, I was dismissed from all diagnoses. I don't take the medications anymore. And I was a child protection worker for over a decade, the highest burnout job there is, I think. And I obtained a 4-year college degree, and now I own my own business, and life is absolutely beautiful. But I could have made that my life sentence. I really feel like
Yeah,
for
very
me, that
easily.
diagnosis felt like a life sentence.
Sure. And
Yeah.
especially
So,
at that age too, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
everything's still taking shape. Right? I mean, it's not even till almost like 25 when everything kind of starts to completely hardwire up there and set things in stone. So you're still trying to figure it out. Your body's still trying to value your mind. And here's, like you said, somebody else telling you what life has in store for you without ever having a chance to figure it out for yourself.
And I
So
think,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, well, still today, a lot of people carry those diagnoses and believe it's a life sentence, believe there is no way
Yeah.
out, and I'm here to say that, yeah, maybe you will always forever have that diagnosis, but by no means is it a life sentence. I'm living proof of that. That you
Yeah.
can move through it and you can create a different future for yourself.
Yeah. So walking backwards here, and forgive me if like connection is the wrong word, but when your father, is successful where you weren't, and success is even worse to say, right? But somehow that's what we've put on that situation. Are you a believer in that, the sense that there's that connection of like, okay, that like I wasn't successful and here's what had happened with my father. Is there a reason here that it, went one way for him and another way for me, or somewhere in between there? Is there some kind of like belief in, I don't know, for lack of better terms, there's a reason for everything? Did
Yeah,
you find a reason in that, or is that not something that you look at all?
to find this, right? To find the message in the mess.
Yeah.
I truly believe that that was a huge part of my journey that was necessary in this lifetime for me to be able to have the learnings and the understanding I have today. And I actually have
Yeah.
written a chapter in a book, and I titled it Earthly Hugs and Soul Kisses. And it's a letter to my father. And it was very much a part of my healing journey. And it was kind of that final letter
Yeah.
of, this was my view of our journey together while on earth, and this is where the journey is at now, and this is how I've turned our mess into a message, and how
Yeah.
I'm living the legacy that essentially you started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have a couple different like timelines as far as how the world views mental illness. That here you are, like as you mentioned, your father had this personality, and this, what we look at today as like, yeah, like we want a parent to be like that. Number one, we definitely would love to see more dads viewed in this, like, just spontaneous and not so serious. And yes, there's all this love, but you viewed him as that. And then, the world tells you that no, he's, mentally ill. And that explains all these behaviors you thought were wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then then your own journey kind of intertwines there, and world is telling you that you're bipolar, and here's what that means for you. And then here you are today with how the things have you. So you have all these like points on a timeline as far as just how we see
Mm-hmm.
mental illness. How do you now look back at all those things, and what have you learned from that, number one? But number two, what do you think that we need to see as a society, differently with all this?
I'm just going to profess with this, these are my beliefs, so by no means am I a
Sure.
doctor or whatever, but my experience has been that with mental illness, we place such, even though we're moving out of the state of a stigma, right, where there's a big movement, there's no more stigma on mental
Yeah.
health, we're still using it very much as a labeling method, right? And when I feel like when we label
Yeah.
ourselves, we take on that entire essence of something that maybe only a small piece fits with us. And just because it fits
Yeah.
in that moment does not by any means mean it's going to fit in a year from now or a year and a half from now.
Yeah.
And it's like we pigeonhole ourselves into, this is what my future looks like because I have,
Yeah.
I mean, ADHD, for example, right now. I went to a networking group earlier, and almost every single woman said there, my business is got this going on because I've got ADHD and I've got ADHD. And if you really ask them, do you really have this diagnosis? Most likely they don't actually have a DSM
No.
diagnosis. But because they have multiple ideas, therefore it means they have ADHD. Right. So we're even labeling ourselves when we don't actually have a DSM diagnosis. But to me, that's the first step in pigeonholing people that actually do have that diagnosis, that they will never change, that this is who they always are going to be. And I truly believe that healing your inner child, working through your trauma at a deep level, practicing forgiveness, you can move through any mental illness. I believe that some mental illnesses, those people have a better understanding of what reality is here, but it's too hard for everybody else to accept because it's not comfortable. It's not the norm that we've been treated to, or we've been trained to believe in. So therefore they're immediately just placed in a corner, right? Like, oh, you're weird. You've got bipolar, you've got schizophrenia, you've got all of these things. I truly do not believe that. And again, these are my beliefs and through my story, and what I've been through. But even working with a multitude of clients who come to me and carry diagnoses and are on very heavy medications, the journey is never about getting them off medications or getting them to no longer carry a diagnosis. The journey is to just get them to a place of internal peace and happiness. And I will tell you, when they do, there's no need for it anymore.
No, I'm 100% with you. I mean, even before I started all this work myself, my wife and I were teachers for about 10 years, Montessori teachers. So I don't know how much you know about educational philosophies, but Montessori is very much a life philosophy before it's an educational philosophy. But in 10 years, and we're talking middle schoolers, where everything's changing and we have to find a reason for everything, whatever that is. But ADHD is one of those. It's like, okay, that explains everything. Check. I think in 10 years, there was one child. And I mean, every year there was at least 30 or 40 kids in my classroom. One child out of 10 years, I can absolutely say was diagnosed with that. And take out like all the other things that go along with that. There's still a beautiful child, but I mean, there were interventions that would like absolutely needed to happen. Not because of anything like wrong they did, but they were truly healing for them. And I mean, we're talking years and years ago, but it's still the same story today that we put that on somebody, child or adult, almost to ease our minds versus like, what's truly beneficial for them. But I'm 100% with you that I think for the person that's diagnosed with it, they see things a lot clearer and different than we do. And I think for the rest of us, like what we have to do with it is just look at it in the sense that, okay, that helps guide my education towards what I need to do and what I need to kind of pay attention to get me, to speak to them, in a way that's going to be loving and compassionate and, accepting. No, I'm definitely with you on that one. And it's frustrating, to see, especially with people that do the work for it, is like, you get caught up with looking for an answer and it's like, here's 10 ways to manage your anxiety. Here's 6 ways to kick depression to the curb. And it's like you said, I mean, you have no idea what life is going to throw at you. You can't say that, but I think having, a label at least gets you to the point that, okay, this is how I get to navigate the world. And now I understand that,
Yeah. And I think like that label, I do believe that certain things need to be crutches and certain opportunities aren't available to us anymore. And sometimes we use it as a scapegoat. I mean, I know I did it when I had the diagnosis because it's a lot easier than trying to figure it out because there's not support for it, right? There's support for like, here's another medication. Here's, such a quick fix. So
So on your path now, as you look at today and going forward, what's the inspiration that drives you day in and day out? Is it, looking back at what you've been through, or something more external, or a combination of both?
Constant inspiration um, is that quote by Ram Dass. We're all just walking each other home. And I truly believe the teacher becomes the learner through teaching, and the learner becomes the teacher through learning, that reciprocal
Yeah,
um, event. And I know how important it is. And I know that I want to go home. I'm ready to go home. In the aspect of breaking free of this illusion, and the way to get there is to practice forgiveness and love, and just walk one another home.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I don't know if I've ever heard that phrase, and I'm so glad I found it today here. So I appreciate you sharing that,
Yeah.
and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. Thank you so